Evan Turner wasn't looking for anything special that afternoon. He'd stopped at the roadside antique shop mostly to kill time before meeting a client. A weathered building leaning into the wind, its windows filmed with grime and sun-faded signs promising estate finds and treasures from the past. The bell above the door gave a tired clang as he stepped inside, releasing the scent of dust, linseed oil, and old wood. He'd always liked places like this, the hush between shelves, the weight of time clinging to every object. There was something comforting about things that had already survived a century. They seemed steadier than people. Evan wandered the narrow aisles, idly brushing his fingers over porcelain figurines and cracked leather books. Then he saw it. The mirror. It leaned against the far wall, half hidden behind a wardrobe door. Nearly 6 feet tall, framed in dark mahogany carved with winding vines and faded gold leaf. The glass was mottled with age, the kind of surface that turned reflections into ghosts. For a moment, he simply stood there, caught by the quiet authority of it, how it seemed to observe him rather than the other way around. "Beautiful piece," the shopkeeper said, appearing beside him as if conjured by thought. She was an older woman, her voice brittle as dried paper. Came from a manor up north. Family estate cleared after the last owner passed. 19th century, maybe earlier. Prices low, considering. Evan crouched to examine the base. A small crack ran along the lower edge, and the frame bore faint scorch marks. Old fire damage, maybe. "Low price for something like this?" he asked. She smiled without warmth. "Most people don't like mirrors that old. They say they hold on to things." He laughed, thinking it a sales tactic, and pulled out his wallet. The mirror cost him less than his car's monthly insurance. As he loaded it into the back of his SUV, he caught his reflection in the warped glass. For a fleeting instant, he thought he saw movement behind his image, a flicker of shadow crossing the frame. He blinked, and it was gone. Still, as he drove home with the mirror wrapped in an old blanket, a small, unreasonable thought gnawed at him. He hadn't chosen the mirror. It had chosen him. Evan lived alone in a narrow, 2-story house that always felt slightly too big for him. His wife, Claire, had moved out 2 years earlier, an absence that still echoed through the halls like a faint aftertaste of laughter. He worked from home now, a freelance designer who spent too many hours staring into digital screens, avoiding the silence that waited beyond them. The mirror changed that silence. He placed it in the hallway between his study and the stairs, where it caught the afternoon light from the window. Its dark frame looked almost regal against the pale wall, a relic among the modern furniture. Dust motes drifted through the beam of sunlight like slow-falling snow, and the mirror captured it all, every shimmer, every shadow. At first, he barely noticed how often he looked at it. Passing by with a coffee cup in hand, glancing over his shoulder, sometimes pausing to adjust his tie or smooth his hair. But each time, his reflection seemed subtly delayed, a fraction of a second slower than his movements, as though it were a recording struggling to keep up. He told himself it was just the old glass, the uneven surface creating the illusion of lag. Antique mirrors were imperfect, after all, but the feeling persisted, crawling under his skin like a splinter he couldn't remove. On the third night, he woke around 2 a.m. to the soft creak of the floorboards outside his bedroom, the kind of sound a house makes as it settles. Except this was rhythmic, measured, like footsteps. He sat up, listening, heart hammering. The noise stopped. He stepped into the hallway. The moonlight spilling through the window landed squarely on the mirror. His own reflection stared back at him, pale and tired, the rest of the corridor swallowed in darkness. Nothing moved. Still, the air around it felt colder. He reached out and touched the glass. It was warm. When morning came, he told himself it was just his imagination, that the loneliness of the house was playing tricks on him. But as he passed the mirror again, sunlight glinting off the carved wood, he noticed something that made his breath catch. A hairline seam running along the right edge of the frame, one that hadn't been there before. Evan crouched beside the mirror, running his thumb along the edge of the frame. The seam was almost invisible, a fine line cutting through the dark wood like a healed scar. He pressed lightly. It shifted. Barely. He leaned closer, squinting. The wood around the seam didn't match the rest of the frame's pattern. The vine carvings curved unnaturally there, as if interrupted mid-growth. He fetched a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and shone it along the surface. Dust clung thickly in the grooves, but the lines stood out. Precise, deliberate. Not damage. Design. The mirror wasn't one solid piece. He fetched a flathead screwdriver and gently worked the tip into the seam. The tool caught on something metallic. A latch. When he turned it, there was a faint click, soft, almost apologetic, and the side panel loosened by half an inch. His pulse quickened. He pulled it open. The mirror's right edge swung forward like a narrow door, revealing a hollow cavity running the length of the frame. Inside, the air smelled of dust and something older. Iron, varnish, faint traces of candle smoke. A single object lay within, a folded piece of parchment bound with a red ribbon. Evan hesitated. The rational part of his mind screamed that this was probably worthless, some forgotten scrap tucked away by a previous owner, a note from an antique restorer, an invoice. But curiosity drowned out reason. He untied the ribbon and carefully unfolded the paper. It was a letter. The handwriting was elegant but spidery. The ink faded to a deep brown. The language was English, though slightly archaic. The date at the top, April 14th, 1892. To whoever finds this, the mirror must not be moved. It is a vessel, not an ornament. The thing within cannot cross on its own. Do not open the back. If you value your reflection, leave it untouched. The rest of the words blurred as his pulse thundered in his ears. He stared into the glass, half expecting a trick of light, a hidden camera, anything that might explain the chill crawling over his skin. His reflection stared back, expression unreadable. He laughed, too loud, too forced. Nice try, he muttered to the empty hallway. Great antique marketing, whoever you were. But as he closed the panel, he could have sworn his reflection smiled a second longer than he did. Evan couldn't stop thinking about the letter. It sat on his desk now, weighted down with a coffee mug, the ink glistening faintly under the lamp. The mirror must not be moved. The words looped through his mind like a quiet chant. It should have been laughable, some melodramatic relic from a bygone age, but the phrasing lodged under his skin in a way that made him uneasy. He reread it for the 5th time, tracing the lines with a fingertip. The paper was thick and fibrous, its edges crumbling slightly, the smell of old ink mingling with dust. Whoever had written it had meant it to last. That alone gave him pause. He turned the parchment over, nothing on the back. No name, no address. Just the date and that eerie message. By mid-afternoon, curiosity overcame reason again. He carried the letter back to the hallway and studied the mirror more closely. The back, as the letter had mentioned, was sealed with thin wooden planks reinforced by tiny, hand-forged nails. He crouched, flashlight in hand, and caught a faint shimmer where the boards met, almost like dried resin. Someone had gone to great lengths to keep it closed. Don't open the back, he murmured, half smiling to himself. Which, of course, means there's something behind it. He fetched his tools again. The first nail came loose with a reluctant squeal. The second snapped clean in half. With each one removed, the air seemed to grow heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath. When the final board came free, a waft of cold air brushed across his face. Impossibly cold, like air from a cellar that hadn't been opened in decades. He angled the flashlight inside. Behind the backing was a second layer of glass. But this one wasn't reflective. It was smoky, opaque, like it had been painted from within. And etched faintly on the inner surface were symbols, circles intersecting, lines branching out like veins, a pattern too deliberate to be random. Evan stepped back, unsettled. The mirror suddenly felt different, heavier, magnetic. He could swear, just before he covered it again, he saw movement behind that dark inner glass, a shadow shifting where nothing should be. He blinked. It was gone. But when he glanced down at the letter once more, new words had appeared at the bottom, faint, as though written in moisture. You were warned. That night, Evan dreamed of mirrors. He stood in a corridor lined with hundreds of them, tall, thin, cracked, some warped like water, others gleaming as if freshly polished. Each reflected him differently. In one, his face was blurred. In another, older. In another still, not his at all. He reached out to touch the nearest pane, and the reflection leaned forward, first in sync, then faster, until it pressed its palms against the glass while his hand was still midair. He woke with a strangled gasp. The room was dark. Rain tapped against the window. His pulse thundered in his ears. He sat up, throat dry, trying to shake off the dream. Then he heard it. A soft breath. At first, he thought it was whine through the vent. But the sound was too close, too human. He turned toward the open bedroom door, where the dim hallway light fell in a pale stripe. The mirror stood there, perfectly still. He rose slowly, bare feet whispering against the floorboards. The air grew colder as he neared the hallway. His reflection appeared, faint and silvered in the low light. For a moment, everything was ordinary, just his tired face, his messy hair, his pulse echoing in his head. Then his reflection exhaled. A fog bloomed across the inside of the glass. Evan froze. His own breath came a second later, too late, too out of sync. The fog on the glass lingered, and within it, faint impressions began to take shape. Lines, maybe letters. He stepped closer, squinting. It formed a single word. Below. He stumbled back, heart pounding. No, he whispered, shaking his head. No, no, no. He wiped at the glass, but the word remained faintly etched into the surface, as though written from the inside. He grabbed a blanket and threw it over the mirror. That night he slept on the couch downstairs, the letter locked away in a drawer, the mirror veiled like a corpse in mourning. But sleep didn't save him. Sometime before dawn, he woke again to the unmistakable sound of wood creaking upstairs, as if something large and heavy was shifting its weight just beyond the blanket. And then, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. From the other side of the mirror. The sound froze him where he lay. 3 dull, deliberate thuds that seemed to come from inside the wall. But Evan knew exactly where they came from. The mirror. He sat upright on the couch, every muscle strung tight. The house was silent again, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. He waited, holding his breath, but no more knocks came. Only the steady beat of rain on the roof. He told himself it was the wind, the settling of old wood. Anything but what it had sounded like, knuckles against glass. Morning light eventually crept through the blinds, gray and weak. He made coffee with shaking hands and told himself he'd imagined it. But when he climbed the stairs, dread churned in his gut. The blanket still covered the mirror, the hallway silent. He hesitated before lifting the fabric. His reflection stared back, pale, disheveled, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. The glass was clean, untouched. No word, no fog. For a moment, he almost believed it had all been a nightmare. Then he noticed the fingerprints. 3 of them, smeared faintly on the inside of the glass, elongated, almost claw-like, pressed from beneath the surface. He staggered back, the air seeming to thin around him. His thoughts spun. Maybe it's just damage, some illusion of light, condensation, but no. The marks were too deliberate, too fresh. He grabbed his phone, snapping a photo for proof, but the image came out blank. His reflection visible, the mirror pristine. No fingerprints. Nothing. That's when his phone screen flickered, for just a second, replaced by his own camera feed. But the reflection behind him in that feed wasn't moving. It was watching. Evan dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, the screen cracking like ice. He couldn't take it anymore. He went to the hardware store before noon and bought heavy curtains, hammer, nails. He covered the mirror entirely, sealing its edges so no light touched it. He even dragged a small cabinet in front of it, a crude barrier. By evening, the house felt normal again. Quiet. Still. But as he sat in his study, trying to drown his nerves and work, his phone lit up on its own. A single notification blinking across the cracked screen. Gallery updated. 1 new photo. The thumbnail showed the mirror, uncovered. Evan stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. His pulse thudded in his ears. He hadn't taken any photos since that morning, and he'd locked the mirror behind both fabric and furniture. Hands trembling, he tapped the notification. The image filled the screen. The mirror stood fully exposed, the blanket folded neatly at its base. The cabinet had been pushed aside. His reflection, or something like it, stood centered in the frame. It looked like him, but the expression was wrong. The smile too sharp, the eyes too dark. And behind that figure, inside the mirror's depth, something else, an outline of another face, watching from just over the reflection's shoulder. He felt bile rise in his throat. He locked the phone, then unlocked it again, hoping the image would vanish, some glitch. But it was still there. The timestamp read 3:03 a.m. The same hour he'd heard the knocks. He deleted the image. Or tried to. The screen flickered, and the photo reappeared in a new album labeled Reflections. By afternoon, Evan couldn't sit still. Logic clawed at him. There had to be a technical explanation. Remote sync? Cloud backup? Someone hacking his account? But deep down, he knew that wasn't it. The letter's words haunted him. The thing within cannot cross on its own. Maybe, he thought, it doesn't need to cross, if it can watch. That evening, he called the antique shop. The woman's voice on the other end sounded older, weaker somehow. When he asked about the mirror, she went silent for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, "You found the note, didn't you?" Evan's skin prickled. "You knew it was there?" "I suspected," she said. "Not all of them have it. Most are harmless. But if it came from the Harrow estate, then you should get rid of it." He almost laughed. "You're saying it's cursed?" "I'm saying," she replied, her voice trembling now, "some things were never meant to show us ourselves." The line went dead. That night, Evan couldn't bring himself to sleep upstairs. He stayed in the living room, lights on, the mirror sealed behind the heavy curtain. At 3:03 a.m., his phone buzzed again. New photo saved. Reflections, too. In this one, the curtain was gone, and the figure in the mirror wasn't smiling anymore. Evan didn't open the photo right away. He couldn't. He sat on the couch, phone trembling in his hand, every instinct screaming to look and not to. The screen dimmed to black. He set it face down, forcing his breath to slow. But curiosity was a poison he'd never been able to resist. He unlocked the phone. The picture filled the screen in washed-out tones. His hallway light glowed faintly, the mirror uncovered once more. Only now, there was someone standing in front of it. A figure, tall, indistinct, face blurred as if captured mid-motion. Evan's pulse spiked. The timestamp, 3:04 a.m., 1 minute after the last. He zoomed in. The figure's hand was pressed against the glass. But not on the outside. From within, a noise tore through the silence. A thud. He dropped the phone and whipped his head toward the stairs. The air thickened, heavy with that faint scent again, iron and old wood. The same smell that had drifted from the hidden compartment. He climbed the stairs slowly, heart battering his ribs. The hallway stretched before him, dim and gray. The cabinet he'd shoved in front of the mirror had been moved, angled away, like someone had dragged it aside just enough to reach behind. The blanket was gone. His reflection stood waiting. But it wasn't him. The figure in the mirror wore his same clothes, mirrored his every motion, until he stopped moving. And the reflection didn't. It tilted its head slightly, the motion slow, unnatural. Evan whispered, "What are you?" For a heartbeat, nothing. Then, softly, like a breath across the surface of water, a whisper rose from the glass. "You let me see." He stumbled back, nearly tripping over the cabinet. His hand brushed against the folded letter he'd kept in his pocket for reasons he couldn't explain. The paper was cold, almost wet. When he unfolded it, new ink had bled through the fibers, forming two crooked words beneath the warning. He watched. "Now I see." The mirror's surface rippled, just once, like something beneath it had stirred. Evan bolted down the stairs, slammed the study door shut, and turned the lock. His phone buzzed again. A new notification. Video saved, front camera recording, live. It was streaming from upstairs. The phone vibrated in Evan's hand like it had a heartbeat. The screen glowed with the words front camera, live recording, the thumbnail showing the dim outline of his hallway. He didn't remember setting up any recording. He swiped it open. The video played, grainy, washed in pale blue light from the window. The angle was strange, as if the camera were floating midair. The mirror stood uncovered again, its glass faintly shimmering. The image rippled with static, the sound nothing but low distortion. Then, movement. A figure stepped into frame. Him, or something wearing his shape. Same build, same hair. The twin raised its hand and touched the glass. The mirror rippled again and pulled. The reflection's arm seemed to vanish into it, like the surface was liquid. The thing turned its head toward the camera and smiled. Then the screen went black. Evan dropped the phone. It hit the floor, skidding under the table. He backed away, chest tight. The silence in the house felt unnatural now, like sound itself was being swallowed. He forced himself to retrieve the phone, to verify it was real. The recording was still there. He pressed pause this time, studying the still frame. His own face staring at the camera, but behind him, in the mirror, another silhouette stood in the background. Taller. Watching. His mind splintered between explanations. A glitch. Sleepwalking. Maybe he'd filmed himself unconsciously. But no, the angle didn't match any surface in the house. He needed to leave. He grabbed his coat, keys, and drove. The rain hammered the windshield as he pulled into the empty parking lot of a 24-hour diner. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, and the normalcy of human voices steadied him. He ordered coffee he didn't drink and stared at the condensation on the window. When he finally looked at his reflection in the glass, something cold gripped him. The diner lights flickered, and his reflection didn't follow. It stayed still, head tilted, eyes fixed on him. Then, very slowly, it raised its hand and traced a shape on the glass between them, a small circle intersected by two lines. The same pattern carved inside the mirror's frame. Evan jerked back from the diner window, chair scraping loud against the tile. The waitress looked over, startled. "You okay, hon?" He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, thought I saw something." She gave him a polite nod and moved away, but her reflection in the glass didn't. It lingered beside his, unmoving, staring directly at him even after the real woman turned. He blinked hard, and it vanished. The coffee had gone cold. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. That symbol, the circle intersected by two lines, burned behind his eyelids. It hadn't been random. He'd seen it twice now, etched inside the mirror, and now drawn by his reflection itself. He opened his phone and searched it. The results were a strange mix: alchemical sigils, ritual diagrams, fragments of Latin. One image, from a digital scan of an 1880s journal, matched almost perfectly. Its caption read, "Seal of Two Realms, a barrier between reflection and substance." He stared at the screen, his breath catching. A barrier. His phone suddenly dimmed. The screen flickered, showing the front camera again. His own face stared back, until a shadow passed behind him. He spun. Nothing. The diner was calm, the clink of dishes steady, the night outside still. He turned back to the phone. The shadow was now closer. He shoved it into his pocket, tossed some bills on the counter, and stumbled into the rain. The moment the door shut behind him, it was like stepping into another world. Air thick, sound muffled, colors dulled. The reflection in the wet pavement stretched longer than his body, distorted. He took a step. The reflection didn't. It smiled. He ran. When he got home, drenched and trembling, the house lights flickered once as if acknowledging his return. The mirror loomed at the end of the hallway, shrouded again, but the fabric bulged outward, as if caught on something from beneath. He backed away. From behind the curtain came a faint scrape, glass against wood. And then, softly, like someone tracing with a nail, came the sound of that same symbol being drawn. Circle. Line. Line. Evan whispered, "It's not a barrier anymore, is it?" The mirror answered with a whisper of its own. "No. A door." The word echoed inside Evan's skull long after the whisper had faded. A door. He stood frozen at the base of the stairs, eyes fixed on the shrouded mirror. The fabric trembled faintly, as if breathing. Every instinct screamed to run, but something colder, deeper, rooted him in place. He needed to understand. He took a step closer. "What's on the other side?" he asked, his voice barely more than breath. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Then a faint crackling sound rose from beneath the cloth, like static or the shifting of old paper. The lamp in the hallway flickered twice, and in those brief stutters of light, he saw the shape of a hand press against the fabric, palm out, fingers long and sharp against the cloth. Evan stumbled backward, colliding with the wall. "No," he muttered. "You're not real." But the hand didn't vanish. It slid slowly downward, leaving dark trails across the curtain. Something inside him snapped. He ran to the mirror, yanked the covering free, and hurled it aside. The glass shimmered, rippling like disturbed water. Behind the surface, the shape of a figure moved, his own, yet not. The face stared out with hollow eyes and an almost human hunger. "You shouldn't have opened it," it said. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere, soft as breath against the inside of his ear. Evan's mind splintered. "Who are you?" "Your echo," it whispered. "What the glass remembers." He staggered back, heart hammering. "You're not me." The reflection smiled. "Not yet." The symbols etched within the frame glowed faintly, a pale, feverish light pulsing through the wood. Then came the sound, low, resonant, a hum like air being drawn through an invisible tunnel. The mirror's surface deepened, darkened, until it looked less like glass and more like an open mouth. The light bulbs overhead burst one by one. The air filled with the smell of hot metal and ozone. Evan turned to flee, but his reflection stayed perfectly still. And in the instant before the darkness swallowed the room, the reflection winked. When the lights flickered back to life, the hallway was empty. Evan was gone. When consciousness returned, it came with the taste of metal and the sound of dripping water. Evan opened his eyes to darkness. Thick, living darkness that pressed against his skin like fog. His breath came out in shuddering bursts. The air was cold, damp, and heavy with the scent of dust, and something older, something like burnt wood. He sat up. Beneath him, the floor was smooth as glass. Except it was glass. He looked down and froze. Beneath his palms shimmered the faint outline of his own house, upside down, distorted as though he were peering through a frozen pond. The hallway, the walls, the dim lamps. He was looking through the mirror, from the wrong side. He tried to speak, but his voice echoed oddly, thinner, as though the space itself swallowed sound. He stood, heart pounding, and turned in a slow circle. The world around him was an inverted copy of his own. Hallway walls melted into shadow, the doors mere outlines filled with gray mist. The air shimmered faintly, and faint reflections drifted across surfaces like trapped memories. He called out, "Hello." Somewhere distant, his own voice answered, but not in sync. A few seconds too late. He moved toward the dim light ahead, where his reflection of the study should be. Instead, the corridor curved downward like a spiral, pulling him toward a pale glow at its end. As he walked, fragments of sound flickered through the dark. Laughter, footsteps, whispering, familiar voices twisted into echoes. Then he saw it, the other him, standing ahead, half shadow, half light. Its eyes reflected no light at all. The figure smiled faintly. "You made it through." Evan's throat tightened. "What is this place?" "A memory," the reflection said. "Yours. And theirs." "Whose?" The reflection tilted its head. "The ones who looked too long." Evan backed away, pulse thundering. "I'm not staying here." "You don't get to choose," the figure whispered, stepping closer. Its movements were slower than human, as though walking through thick liquid. "Every mirror remembers what it shows. You live there now." Evan turned and ran, but the hallway bent impossibly, curving back upon itself until he was once again standing before the same mirror, facing himself from the other side. And the glass began to crack. The first crack was faint, a hairline thread of white light running across the glass at Evan's feet. Then another, branching outward like lightning under ice. The floor pulsed with a dull vibration that climbed up through his bones. "No," he whispered, stepping back. The cracks followed, spiderwebbing in every direction. Beneath the surface, faint images began to flicker. Faces, hands, eyes, pressing upward as if trapped within the glass. They whispered things he couldn't understand, syllables that slid through his mind like oil. The reflection, the other Evan, watched calmly. "It's remembering," he said. "Every reflection it ever held. Every person who stared too long. You've joined them now." Evan shook his head, his voice breaking. "I'm not one of them." The reflection smiled faintly. "You will be, when the glass closes." A thunderous sound cracked through the air, like shattering porcelain. The floor beneath Evan gave way, and he fell, tumbling through shards of light and darkness, through flashes of rooms, faces, mirrors upon mirrors. He landed hard on something solid, gasping, palms slick with cold sweat. He was in a room, not his house, not the reversed world, but a space made entirely of mirrors. Every wall, every surface gleamed faintly, each one reflecting him 1,000 times over. But in every reflection, something was off, a twitch too early, a grimace he hadn't made, eyes that didn't blink when he did. He turned slowly, and all his reflections turned toward him, not mimicking, not following, watching. Then one of them moved. A single reflection, in the far corner, stepped forward while the others remained still. Its eyes glowed faintly. It pressed its palm against the glass, and the sound, soft, deliberate, reverberated through every mirror in the room. "Knock, knock, knock." Evan's breath hitched. "What do you want?" "To take your place," it said in his voice. That's how the door stays open. The mirrors began to hum, a low, resonant note that vibrated through the air. Every reflection began to smile, their mouths stretching wider and wider until the faces distorted into grotesque masks of glee. The surface beneath his feet softened, rippling like water. And from beneath it, hands began to reach up. Evan staggered backward as the first hand broke through the floor. Pale, translucent, fingers too long, the nails sharp like glass splinters. Another followed, then another, each one clawed upward, grasping blindly at the air. The temperature dropped so sharply that his breath turned to fog. The mirrors hummed louder. A deep, resonant vibration filled the chamber, almost like a pulse. Light bled from the cracks in the glass, forming thin ribbons that coiled through the air like smoke. The reflections around him began to melt, features warping, mouth stretching, eyes hollowing until they were nothing but black voids. Evan stumbled toward what looked like a doorway, a patch of mirror that shimmered differently, its surface darker, deeper. It felt thinner, as though it might break through. He pounded his fists against it. "Let me out." The reflection nearest him tilted its head. "Out," it echoed. "There is no out." The hands had almost reached his legs now, their cold touch grazing his jeans. Panic ignited in him like fire. He swung his fist into the nearest mirror. It cracked, shards raining down. But instead of revealing a wall, the surface behind it rippled, and through that opening, he saw something impossible. His own hallway, on the right side of the mirror. His world. His home. He didn't think, he dove toward it. The glass shattered around him, and for one blinding instant, he felt weightless, falling through water that wasn't wet, through cold that burned like fire. Then he hit wood. Evan gasped, sucking in air that felt real. He was sprawled on the floor of his hallway. The lights above flickered weakly, one bulb swinging on its cord. The mirror stood upright again, perfectly intact. No crack, no glow, no hum. Just glass. He crawled backward, shaking. His reflection stared back, normal, lifeless. He whispered, "I'm out." Then his reflection blinked. Evan didn't. His own body froze. His reflection smiled faintly, lifted a hand, and waved. On the other side of the mirror, he stood, watching, screaming without sound. The one in his house turned and walked away. Evan's scream never reached his ears. It bounced soundlessly inside the mirror's surface, muffled by the impossible barrier that now separated him from his own life. He pounded against the glass, but the reflection, his copy, only tilted its head slightly, studying him like an animal in a cage. Then it smiled. He felt his throat tighten. The thing on the outside moved with his same gait, his same posture, even the same nervous twitch of the jaw, but there was a stillness in it, a wrongness. His double walked calmly down the hallway, turned off the lights, and disappeared from view. Evan was left in the dark. He pressed both palms to the glass, his breath fogging the inside. From this side, the air was thick and metallic, every exhale coming slower than it should. The silence was unbearable, like sound itself had been stripped away. He tried to shout again, but his voice died before reaching his lips. He turned, searching for a way out. The mirrored corridor stretched endlessly in both directions, identical copies of his home fading into shadow. It was a maze of reflections, each one showing pieces of him, but never quite right. Some faces blinked when he didn't. Others whispered soundlessly. One smiled, its lips red with something that looked too much like blood. He stumbled backward until his shoulder struck cold glass. "Think," he muttered, though the word came out like static. "Think." In the silence that followed, he heard faint noises from beyond the mirror. Footsteps, a kettle boiling, the scrape of a chair on tile. His own life, playing out like a movie he could only watch. Then came the voice, his voice, from the other side. Calm, cheerful. "Morning, Claire," it said. Evan's chest seized. Claire, his ex-wife. She had keys. She sometimes stopped by to drop off mail. He slammed his fists against the glass. "No, don't." But the words didn't cross over. Through the surface, he saw the door open, saw her step inside with a cautious smile. The copy turned toward her, eyes bright, warm, utterly human. Then it looked back at the mirror, right at him, and mouthed a single word. "Watch." Evan's fist struck the glass again and again until his knuckles bled light instead of blood, silvery trails that vanished into the mirror's surface. He screamed her name, but Claire didn't even glance toward the hallway. From her side, there was no sound, no flicker, nothing to suggest she sensed the nightmare watching her from inside the glass. The double moved toward her. Calm, confident. Hey, Claire said, smiling hesitantly. Didn't expect you to pick up the call. You sound better. Better. The word hit him like a blade. He watched as the imitation poured coffee, sat with her at the kitchen table, laughed when she laughed. Every gesture was perfect, his mannerisms, his tone, even the way he rubbed the back of his neck when thinking. It wasn't mimicry. It was possession. He slammed the glass again, but the mirror didn't even tremble. His reflection, the thing, turned slightly, meeting his eyes across the impossible divide, and for a heartbeat its smile faltered. He saw something ancient beneath the human mask, something that had worn faces long before his. Then it whispered, though he couldn't hear the words. He felt them, vibrating through the glass, into his bones. You left the door open. Someone has to live there. No, Evan mouthed. Give it back. The figure only tilted its head toward Claire, who was now showing it something on her phone. It laughed again, his laugh, and reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Evan's vision blurred with fury. He pressed his palms flat against the mirror, trying to remember the sigil carved into the frame. The circle with two crossing lines, the seal of two realms. He drew it across the surface with his finger, carving light into the glass. The mirror groaned under his touch, a low hum reverberating through the mirrored world. Claire looked up suddenly, eyes darting to the hallway. For the first time, she frowned. Did you hear that? The imitation froze, then smiled again. Just the house settling. Evan slammed his hand into the sigil one last time. The world shook. The reflection's image flickered, glitching, its human mask warping. And for the first time, it looked afraid. The mirror screamed. That was the only way Evan could describe the sound. Not shattering glass, not grinding stone, but something alive, furious. The light from the sigil burned through the surface, splitting the reflection in a dozen fragments that twisted and folded like melting film. The imitation staggered back on the other side, its face rippling between his and something unrecognizable. Hollow eyes, a mouth stretching too wide to belong to any human. Claire gasped. Evan, what's happening to your face? Evan pressed both palms to the glowing sigil, every nerve screaming. Run, he shouted, though he didn't know if the words would cross. Claire, run. She froze, trembling. The imitation turned to her, its voice overlapping with his like two recordings out of sync. Stay, it whispered, reaching for her hand. You'll understand soon. Evan slammed his fists into the glass again. The symbol flared bright white, the entire mirror vibrating like a heartbeat. Then, with a final deafening crack, it split from corner to corner. For a split second, both worlds blurred, his and hers, colliding through the fracture. He saw his kitchen overlap with the endless mirrored corridor behind him, Claire's terrified face flickering between light and shadow. Then everything collapsed inward. Evan was thrown backward, crashing onto the mirrored floor. Shards of light rained around him like glass snow. The surface beneath him pulsed faintly, no longer solid, a pool of silver liquid spreading outward. In its reflection, he saw dozens of faces emerging, old, young, each one faintly familiar, each one mouthing the same word, stay. No, he cried, clawing toward the fracture, toward the faint outline of his house flickering beyond the rippling surface. Claire was there, reaching out, eyes wide with horror. Their fingertips met through the trembling membrane of glass and light. Her touch was warm, real. Then something yanked her backward. The imitation's hand clamped around her wrist, dragging her from the mirror's edge. She screamed his name, a sound that tore through both worlds. Evan lunged, but the surface sealed in an instant, trapping him in silence once again. And this time, the glass showed nothing at all. Silence. A silence so absolute it rang in Evan's skull. The mirror was blank now. No Claire, no imitation, no hallway, no light. Just smooth, depthless glass stretching in every direction like the surface of a still lake. He pressed his forehead against it, trembling. Claire, he whispered, voice cracking. Nothing answered but the faint echo of his own breath, hollow and delayed. He sank to his knees. His reflection didn't follow. For a long moment, there was only the weight of loss, the brutal realization that he had failed to pull her free, that the thing wearing his face now walked in his world. But then the floor pulsed beneath his palms, the glass warming slightly, and a ripple of light spread outward from where he touched it. The surface shimmered, forming faint outlines, rooms, corridors, fragments of scenes flickering like dying film. He saw her, Claire, curled on the floor, clutching her arm. The imitation stood over her, its features flickering between his own and something black-eyed, formless. "Please," she begged. "Evan, what's wrong with you?" The thing crouched down, brushing her cheek gently. "He's watching," it said. "But soon he'll forget." Evan slammed his fist against the mirror. "No, you don't get to take her." The impact sent cracks spidering through the reflection, but the vision remained. The imitation lifted its head, meeting his gaze through the shimmering veil, and smiled. Then, shockingly, it spoke inside the mirror world, the voice vibrating directly into Evan's skull. "You can come back," it said. "Trade places. It's simple." He froze. "What do you mean?" The cracks glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. "The door only closes when one side is empty. Leave yourself behind, and she walks free." Evan's breath hitched. The air tasted of metal and smoke. He understood, though he didn't want to. To save her, he'd have to stay. He stared through the glass, at her terrified face, at the monster wearing his smile, and whispered, "If that's what it takes." The mirror flared white, so bright it erased every shadow. And when the light faded, two reflections stood side by side. Both of them smiled. The world spun sideways. For a moment, Evan couldn't tell which side of the mirror he was on. He could feel the cold glass against his skin and, at the same time, the faint warmth of the room beyond. His vision doubled, two realities bleeding into one another like wet ink. Claire's scream broke through the haze. She stumbled backward as the imitation's face twisted, splintering like a reflection in broken water. Its skin shimmered, peeling into fragments of silver light. Evan pushed against the glass with everything he had, the light burning through his veins. "Let her go," he shouted. The imitation looked at him, or through him. "She's not mine," it said, voice rippling. "She belongs to you." The words struck like a blow. The air thickened, the floor vibrating as cracks split across both worlds. Evan reached out one last time. His hand met the surface and passed through. The sensation was indescribable, like plunging into liquid lightning. For an instant, he was everywhere. Inside the glass, inside the house, inside himself. He saw memories twisting together, childhood reflections, mirrors in bathrooms, shop windows, puddles, all connected through the same endless web of glass. Then it was over. Evan fell forward, gasping, hitting solid wood. Warm air rushed into his lungs. The mirror stood before him again, whole and still. But this time, the reflection wasn't him. The man inside the glass screamed, pounding against the surface, eyes wide with terror. Evan stared back, chest heaving. He turned slowly toward Claire. She was crouched in the corner, trembling. "Evan," she whispered. He smiled, tired, sad. "It's okay," he said softly. "It's me." Behind him, the trapped reflection shouted soundlessly, mouthing words he couldn't hear. "Don't trust me. Don't trust what you see." Claire rose shakily, staring between them. "Evan, what's happening?" He stepped toward her, reaching out. "It's over now. I fixed it." But as she took his hand, she flinched. His skin was cold. Too cold. Behind the glass, the real Evan slammed his palms against it, blood running down his arms. The last thing he saw before the mirror went dark was Claire's reflection, smiling faintly, her eyes as black as glass. The house was quiet again. Morning light poured gently through the curtains, soft and golden. To anyone passing by, it would have looked peaceful, ordinary. The kind of stillness that follows after a long storm. Evan, or what now wore his name, stood before the antique mirror, running a hand along its flawless surface. No cracks, no light, just clean, silent glass. His reflection smiled back exactly as it should. Behind that surface, deep within the faint shimmer of silver, another shape still moved, pounding, thrashing, screaming into the void no one could hear. He adjusted his collar, breathing evenly. Claire was in the kitchen, making coffee, her voice soft as she hummed a tune. The creature turned its head slightly, listening. The melody sounded familiar, something Evan had once whistled absent-mindedly when he worked. The imitation smiled, perfectly. It could be him now. Every gesture, every word, every warmth. It walked to the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Smells good," it said in Evan's voice. She looked up, the faintest unease flickering behind her smile. "You look pale. Did you sleep at all?" "Like a mirror," he replied, the joke smooth and casual. She laughed, tension slipping away. Inside the glass, the real Evan could only watch. His fists hit the barrier soundlessly, bloodless now, movements slowing with exhaustion. He saw Claire's face, her trust, her oblivion, and despair hollowed him out from within. The imitation met his gaze briefly, a flicker of recognition crossing its perfect eyes. It lifted one finger to its lips. Shoo! Then it turned away. Days passed. The creature moved through Evan's life flawlessly. It worked, smiled at neighbors, even called Claire love the way he used to. But sometimes, at night, it would stand before the mirror in silence, its expression empty, as though listening to whispers only it could hear. And behind that glass, other shapes began to stir. Dozens. Hundreds. Faces pressed faintly against the silver, their features blurred but their intent clear, watching, waiting. Because the mirror never truly closed. It never forgets what it shows. One night, when the creature passed by, the glass rippled once more, and the trapped reflection smiled. "Your turn," it whispered. The mirror flickered faintly and began to breathe.